A woman by the camera monitors cut off Clint Eastwood's assistant before the interview could start. "No, put it on the other side. I already told you that." The assistant stopped with Clint's note card still in her hand and glanced around like she'd been caught doing something worse than moving a chair 2 feet the wrong way. A few people looked up, then looked away. Clint lifted his eyes from the seat, watched her stand there for a beat, and kept the cards on his lap when she reached for them. "Sorry," the assistant said quietly, stepping in again, like she could fix it fast enough to make the moment disappear. "Then listen the first time," the woman snapped, loud enough for the set to hear it. Clint turned toward her. "She did," he said. "Just that. Flat, certain, impossible to miss." The woman paused, not expecting him to step in. Clint nodded once toward the assistant. "She's helping you. Don't talk to her like that." The assistant froze again, this time because someone had finally said something. The woman pulled back, her voice smaller now, but the room had already moved on. Clint hadn't. He waited until the assistant stepped clear, then looked back toward the interview like nothing about what he'd done needed explaining. The producer gave a tight nod, like she wanted the whole thing buried in the next second. "Fine," she said, already reaching for the schedule in her hand. But the edge was gone. The assistant stayed near Clint's chair, unsure whether to step in or disappear again. Clint saved her the choice. He handed the note cards back to her directly this time. "You're good," he said, low enough that it wasn't for the room, only for her. She took them with both hands and gave a quick nod, still thrown off, but standing straighter than she had a moment earlier. The cameras weren't rolling yet, but nobody on set was pretending they hadn't heard what just happened. The producer tried to restart the room, calling for makeup and framing like she could pull the rhythm back by force. Clint didn't raise his voice or drag it out. He just stayed where he was and waited until the assistant had finished adjusting the cards and mic line near his jacket. Then he looked at the producer and said, "We can do this right, or we can do it twice." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The message landed anyway. The interview would go forward, but not with her setting the tone by humiliating the person doing the work. By the time the cameras finally came on, the room had settled into a different kind of quiet. The producer stayed busy with her clipboard and headset, but she wasn't cutting across the set anymore. The assistant moved in once to fix the angle of Clint's note cards, and once more to smooth the wire near his collar, and this time nobody rushed her. Clint let her work, waited until she was done, then gave the smallest nod before turning back toward the interviewer. It was a tiny gesture, but everyone close enough to see it understood what it meant. She belonged there, and nobody was going to make her feel otherwise again. The interviewer tried to bring the room back to normal with an easy first question about the film, but the energy hadn't fully gone back. You could feel people listening differently now, less to the script, more to the space between everyone in it. The assistant stayed off to the side with the cards in both hands, no longer trying to make herself invisible, and Clint answered the first question without once glancing toward the producer for permission to continue. He gave the room its cue by acting as if the line had already been settled. And because he did, everyone else followed it. The producer stopped correcting people in that sharp, public way. The crew relaxed. The assistant stopped moving, like she was one mistake away from being sent out of the room. About 10 minutes into the interview, The assistant had to step in again when one of the cards slipped out of order. Earlier, that would have been enough to bring the whole room tight. This time, she moved in, fixed it, and stepped back without anyone jumping on her for it. Clint paused just long enough for her to set the stack straight, then picked up his answer where he left off. No sigh, no impatience, no glance past her like she was in the way. The assistant gave a quick thank you under her breath as she turned, and Clint answered with the smallest nod, like he'd heard it and didn't need her to say anything more. What changed the room wasn't just that he had stopped the producer earlier. It was that he kept refusing the rhythm she'd tried to set. Nobody got to use embarrassment as management anymore, not while he was sitting there. The crew had picked up on it by then. A makeup artist who'd barely looked at the assistant before now held the curtain for her on the way past. One of the camera guys shifted a stand without barking for her to move. Small things. Easy to miss if you weren't watching for them. But the assistant noticed. You could tell by the way she stopped hovering at the edge of every task and started doing her job like she actually had the right to be there. When the interview wrapped, people moved fast again, the way film sets always do once the last answer is done. Headsets came off. Someone called for the next setup. A production assistant crossed behind the chairs with a stack of release forms. In the middle of all that, Clint stayed seated long enough for his assistant to gather the cards without rushing. When she reached for the last one, he held onto it for a second and looked up at her. "You did fine," he said. No speech, no smile for the room. Just something meant to land cleanly and stay with her after everyone else had already moved on. She nodded once, like she didn't trust herself to say much more than that, and tucked the cards to her chest before stepping aside for the crew. Nobody was staring now. Nobody was testing her. She was just part of the room again, except not in the same way as before. The producer kept her distance. The interviewer was already talking to someone near the monitors. The set had gone back to work, but the air in it had changed. Clint stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked off toward the next mark without looking around to see who had noticed. He didn't need to. The assistant watched him go, then turned and followed the rest of the crew out, with her shoulders up, her pace steady, and none of that earlier hesitation left in her step.